Again, a number of families in KwaZulu-Natal continue the desperate search for the remains of their loved ones. Dedicated teams and community members have come together to search for those who are still missing. Rescue South Africa's Scher is an expert on search and rescue efforts. He's joining me now live here on Today This Hour. Good afternoon, Mr. Scher. Thank you very much for your time. I understand you've conducted many search and rescue operations. Based on your experience, how difficult does it become? How difficult is the process of recovering a body, for example, after weeks of flooding?
Thanks for the opportunity, Dan, and hello to all the listeners. Yeah, it's an extremely, the debris field is very extensive. So literally kilometers and kilometers of different rivers and tributaries, wherever there was flooded water, that have really made this a complicated rescue scenario. And while people think that if someone was washed away in a certain area, that you should be searching solely in that area. But the remains can be washed away for kilometers, in fact, could even be washed out to sea. Some of the bodies were found on the beaches. Some have been washed out to sea, will never be recovered. Around every little bend, under every bridge, there's debris fields, and people have to painstakingly travel every single meter of the area, searching through such a lot of rubble and debris that is there, including mud, and people could be buried under mud. And while we do know that there are numerous bodies that are still unidentified, the search must continue because there are families that are still missing loved ones. And our job, while we know that it is to recover the mortal remains of people, is an extremely important one. And it's not just Rescue South Africa. We were there with a team from Nelson Mandela University and Rescue South Africa in the early days. And people are still searching, weeks and weeks later. It's because you can't give up and not try and return the bodies to the families so that they can find some form of closure.
For how long do you go on searching? I mean, and how do you go about it in such situations, Mr. Scher?
Well, look, mainly, although there were many teams, we were just one of many, and whether they were private, whether it was government, whether it was fire services, whatever, there are many teams that have been trying to go and locate it, and we rotate out because there's just so much you can physically do before you become exhausted. And it is a duty to the public to actually continue for as long as possible, hoping that you would recover every single one of the bodies so that every single one of those families can get closure. Because even our government owes it as an obligation towards the public to try and find those bodies so that people can find closure. Unfortunately, the facts remain, and I've been to Beira, to different places around the world where it's been flooding situations where some bodies never ever get recovered. Look at Lanesburg, 20 or 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Some bodies were never recovered, and maybe in the future, with future storms and mud and sand getting washed away, remains could come to the surface one day. And some will just have to make peace with the fact they're never going to find their loved ones. And that's extremely difficult because the humans require closure, and closure is with the body.
Very hard. As you were talking there, my mind went back a few weeks ago to a report. I mean, after the water was beginning to recede along the Umgeni River, not far from Inanda, where Pamandla Goke was by the riverbank, and a team of your fellow rescuers were there. A body had been found by children who'd been playing along the riverbank, and then your team was there, or the team of rescuers. And after some time, a couple of them were emotional. It must be very emotionally hard for your team members. I mean, day in and day out. And as you recover bodies, and then as you are not able to help families find closure, it's emotionally taxing, Mr. Scher.
Extremely. I mean, if you consider most of us are family men and women, and our team found some children and adults, and you return them to the families, and in the one instance where the family came and were singing hymns, I mean, we're human beings at the end of the day, and we're supposed to be hardened and being able to deal with these situations. But at the end of the day, we're human, and we suffer and have human emotions just like every other human being. And it's, you know, if you cease to have any empathy with the people you're trying to help, and if it means absolutely nothing to you, that you can't feel the emotion of what you're doing and handing back the bodies of somebody to a family, maybe you shouldn't be doing what we do, because at the end of the day, that is what makes us human. That's why we do what we do. It's because we have that empathy.
Yeah, you said that it's human for us to want to find closure, Mr. Scher. Some of the primary reasons, besides that you've heard from people, that they will continue to say, let's help us to find our loved ones who are missing from the flood. What are some of these? I mean, you've mentioned Beira, Mozambique's second largest city, and other parts of the world. Now we talk about KwaZulu-Natal flooding recently. You've mentioned Langsberg, the floods of 20-odd years ago, nearly 30 years ago. What are the primary reasons that you've had being shared by people to say, please help us to find our missing loved one?
No, I've been, as you know, to various places all over the world. And I've even had people say, if you could just find me a finger, anything to bury, anything to give me closure. And it's a cry of desperation, whether it's from mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, what have you. It is the most normal human reaction to want to find some part of the remains so that you can bury it and get closure. Because humans are made in such a way that we always have hope. And until that hope is finally dashed, and that is by giving them their mortal remains, we always have this false dream that we're going to, that person is alive somewhere, or that by some miracle. And, you know, it's not easy. It's not, you know, whether it's in these sort of circumstances. I've been in emergency services for 40 plus years. And unfortunately, often you deal with situations like this, and it's very hard for families. You know, it's just. Yeah.
I mean, there are still 50 odd.
Closure comes from bodies, you know, when you give them back that. Sorry.
Yeah, officially, we were told a couple of weeks ago by the KZN provincial government, there's still like 50 odd people who are still said to be missing or unaccounted for, and there's still families today in KZN that are saying we need help. Please help us find. Some families, as you said, they believe that their children, those who are still missing, are buried right in the mud under where they were last seen. But from what you've said, they could have been washed away further downstream. What would your message be if such a family member approached you, knowing your experience? An example, and said, Mr. Scher, I need your help. And would you say just keep on looking?
So let me put it to you this way. I find that when people come from all over the places, whether we're doing it nationally, internationally, rescue, in a way, the fact that people will leave their normal lives and come and assist to try and track and trace and find the remains of your loved one almost gives validity to their lives and shows how valuable their lives were. So for the people that are remaining, the fact that we're out there and we're searching and we're trying and we're absolutely doing everything in our power to help them and satisfy them in itself is helping the families get a certain amount of comfort from the fact that their loved ones were important enough for all these various people from all over the place that are really trying their utmost to come and assist them. So even that, at the end of the day, when that's all they have to fall back on, is at least the comfort of knowing that that person didn't die in vain, but many, many people came to try and assist. And that helps families get over the trauma of what we're talking about.
Mr. Ian Scher, thank you very much for your reflections this afternoon. He's, of course, the CEO of Rescue SA, of course, involved in the search and now recovery mission that's underway in KwaZulu-Natal post the floods. And I mean, we don't know the final numbers yet, but I remember the number of 50-odd still missing or unaccounted for being given by the officials on the ground. And many families of those families are still looking. And he says just the fact that people are still willing to look should assist those families somehow to find closure, but it's not easy at all.